Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for your time, for joining us on a busy Tuesday afternoon. Today's topic for the webinar is digital orchestration for a resilient automotive supply chain. A couple of points, housekeeping points before we get started. This will be in listen-only mode. That means the participant can only listen to us. But of course, they're encouraged to put in questions in the option that you get to see on your screen. And the webinar will be recorded and will be made available once the webinar is over, probably in a day or two. And we'll have a question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. And of course, participant can post questions during the webinar. And there was an option to post question when the audience registered for this webinar. So we have received a bunch of questions. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to answer each and every question. In case if we run out of time, we will definitely reach back to you guys via email. All right. So here's the agenda for today. We'll start with a quick introduction about the speakers, and we'll go through topics such as trying to understand the current automotive supply chain challenges and trends and the possible solution. And I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about the Bloom Global Supply Chain Orchestration Platform. And towards the end, we'll get into a question and answer session. All right, quick introduction about today's speakers. I'm Prashant. I'm from Bloom Product Marketing Team. I'm with Bloom since 2020. I'm in supply chain tech space for about a little over or by about 16 odd years. I've worked across functions like customer support, implementation, product management. I was a product manager for a long time, then did a bit of pre-sales, then product marketing now. Before Bloom Global, I was with GT Nexus and later as part of Infor. So that's about me. And I'm joined by my colleague, Francois, from our European office. Francois, would you want to quickly introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Francois. I'm based out of Paris in the Bloom Global office located in France. Um, I'm in charge of business development for Bloom, and before that, I co-founded a supply chain company that has been acquired by Bloom that was more on the manufacturing supply chain, very dedicated to manufacturing industry and especially to aerospace and automotive industry. And before that, I used to work for a big Italian group called Pirelli, uh, obviously active in the automotive industry.
Right. Thanks for that quick introduction, Francois. We'll start with the next slide. We'll get started with discussing the trends and challenges in a typical automotive setup. So, as you guys know, automotive industries is not how it used to be, let's say, 2 decades ago. I think we are moving from a setup where we were talking about internal combustion engines, from manual driving towards electrical vehicles. Today, we are talking about um, the range of vehicles, the battery range, charging time, self-driving vehicles, so on and so forth. Um, Vehicles, I believe now are more defined by software. Software is defining the hardware components that are getting into the electric vehicles, and at the same time, they're kind of influencing the customer behavior as well. So gone are the days where if you had to drive a car, you had to own a car. But now you could just simply subscribe to one, or maybe rent a car, or maybe just get one on demand by using these apps like Ola and Uber, such as Ola and Uber, and especially the days when the OEMs or the car manufacturing companies, they probably produced one or two models for years together, maybe 10, 15, 20 years before they changed the model. And especially in the EV space, if you could recall. Um, Many of us probably we do not know that the components that actually gets into an electric vehicle is different from what gets into an internal combustion engine, especially you know of course there are some parts that can kind of get into both of these vehicles, but there are about 70% of the automotive components that are different. And of course, for people like us, the main difference is the absence of the exhaust pipe that you don't get to see in an electric vehicle. So, so what I'm trying to say is the supply chain in automotive world was is complex as such, and given this evolution, um, the industry moving from a manual, sorry, internal combustion engine towards electric vehicles, it's kind of making things more complicated. And if I have to talk about the Indian history, if I have to kind of recall, probably about 20 odd years ago, we had this mopeds, kind of equivalent to say 50, 60, 70 cc mopeds. That's how it started here in India. Then we had mm, some companies trying to get into EV space, and I can think of Reva, the electric car, which made its debut about 20 years ago. Since then, a lot's been changing, and when it comes to the commercial segment, we are seeing passenger buses from a couple of years ago, and of course, down in India, we have this three-wheeled vehicle called as auto rickshaw, and I'm seeing a lot of electric vehicles now in form of auto rickshaw. So it's a complex supply chain, and especially the OEMs, which are dealing with two different segments, the EV thing and the IC thing. It's complex for them because um, they need to deal with two different types of auto components that kind of gets into the ICE stuff and also the electric vehicle stuff. So there is a complex supply chain that we'll touch in a bit, and especially given the fact that if you look at the supply chain or the supplier setup in a typical automotive supply chain, the levels are too many. I was reading an article where I, I, I remember it could go up to 13 levels, 13 tiers. So, and add to that the number of suppliers itself. Um, the OEMs need to make a call whether they're comfortable using, meaning sticking to limited number of suppliers versus having a large number of suppliers spread across different geographical locations, just to make sure they take care of the risk appropriately. And of course, the risk being not the auto components not getting delivered on time. They kind of look at scenarios of shortage of components, and the recent examples that I can think of is chip shortages. The chips that get into this cars kind of controls a lot of stuff. So uh, so imagine, I mean, I read somewhere that a lot of cars, thousands of cars being parked outside in the yard just because they don't have chips that can be installed, waiting for the chips to arrive. And there is and added to this, there is labor shortage that this industry faces. It's difficult to attract and retain talented labor. And of course, there's another challenge coming with respect to data complexity. Um, Again, I was reading an article where I came across a point where an OEM company was explaining that 80% of the data that they need to run a supply chain effectively, the data resides actually outside of their ERP systems or the systems of records that they use to run their supply chain. So looking all these complexities, it's very difficult to get that 80% of the data from the suppliers into our system to make this supply chains run effectively. And on top of that, we're also looking at the sustainability factor, where a number of countries have signed up to for a net zero commitment by the year 2050. So looking at all these complexities, we are looking at a couple of trends that are showing up, especially the just in time concept. It's kind of getting this OEMs to reconsider the strategy because of the recent disruptions that we got to see in terms of pandemic and the political instability that's happening in Europe. So now the OEMs are looking at stocking 20% of the stock, especially the critical components, so that they don't want to get into situations where, because of shortage of components, they don't want to stop their production. And incidentally, there's another factor when it comes to innovation and forging new partnerships. So all this while, probably the innovation was done in-house, and now they're looking to kind of work closely with their suppliers to innovate a lot of things, and especially given the fact that uh, the ICE internal combustion engine based vehicles are getting evolved into electric vehicles. And it's estimated that by the year 2020, about 70% of the electric vehicles that will be produced will have Android Automotive operating system. So now we have these OEMs transacting with technology companies like Android, Google, and so on and so forth. So gone are the days where car was just an automotive piece. Now it's it's an ecosystem of customer-oriented digital services around the vehicle itself. So, Francois, given your background in automotive space, what's your view on this? What's your take?
Thank you, Prashant. Well, I think you're spot on when you say that the automotive supply chain is one of the most complex one. That is very true. The question is really how are all those changes going to impact the supply chain? And when we say the supply chain, we have to consider the extended one, not only what is happening to the tier one, but also what is happening to the tier twos and tier threes of the world. So that's a crucial point to understand. If we take an example, and we might have time to go through a use case at the end of this webinar from one of our customer, Dana Automotive, who manufactures transmissions. They had to completely not only get up to date and face kind of small changes across their supply chain, they had to completely revamp the supply chain and shift it. Transmissions have drastically changed with the arrival of the electric vehicles. And so, which means, as you said, that they have to be able to manage new technology, new know-how that they don't have internally, which means that they have to even work closer to their extended supply chain. So when we look at those challenges that you see here, very quickly, we've got four main blocks. Um, and those challenges impact all areas of the supply chain, from sourcing to delivery. Because as we said, even if the technology is new, even if the COVID kind of forced the company to restart nearshoring and changing their sourcing strategy, even if the environmental regulation forces them to change a little bit their habits, um, the real final goal remains exactly the same as before. You have to deliver on time, in full, whatever you're selling to your customer. That's the main goal. So, what are the challenges that people are facing here? The first one on the top left corner is the sourcing one, basically. Sourcing is heavily impacted, well, because companies, they need to get that know-how, as we said, on that new technology. Basically, the question is, can I count on my suppliers to make that shift? Or should I completely revisit my supplier portfolio and change my suppliers? Should I coach them? How can I track that they make the right progress? What is going to be the impact if I have a change request on one component? What is going to be the impact on the rest of my bill of material? So that's everything that they have to consider. So it's sourcing new suppliers, it's also part approval management, change requests, revisions. A lot is happening in this block. The next block on the top right is the order management and the purchase order collaboration, basically. Obviously, that's a key part to handle. So how can I manage the capacity of those new suppliers? My forecasts are very foggy because I have very few history on this. and lessons learned from the past, I should be able to better use artificial intelligence to help me building better forecasts. But to do so, I need data. So how can I grab those data? How can I digitalize right from the beginning that new supply chain, make sure that I capture the right data from now on? Bottom left corner, transportation management, obviously key. When you want to achieve your on-time in full deliveries, you can't just stop when the goods are ready to be shipped from your supplier plant. You have to get those shipped, and you have to manage the transportation of your goods in a timely and costly way, adding, as Prashant said, the new components, which is carbon emissions. What's the footprint that you have? And it becomes more and more important now when you have to report on your KPIs to your final customers, that carbon footprint is almost as important as your financial. Um, Being located in France, I'm going to take a kind of French, Italian, and a little bit of American example as well, Stellantis Group. And they launch a plan where they really follow very, very precisely those KPIs with all their suppliers. And if you don't reach the right expectation, you might be put on new business hold only because you have a bad carbon emission footprint. So that's key. And the last block, which is on the lower right corner, we all know that it rarely, very rarely, should I say, happens as expected. So how can you make sure that you detect any exception that is happening across that supply chain? How can you even maybe be able to predict some of those disruptions that may happen so that you could move from reacting immediately to kind of predicting, maybe being a little bit prescriptive as well? Again, to do all of that, you need data, and you need data that are going to move with you because it's a continuous improvement plan. So why do we have all those problems that exist and that persist? Really, because all those data are very fragmented inside your organization, which leads to inaccurate or past due data. Let me add some color to that statement. Multiple departments of your organization need to work together, and in fact, they need to do more than work together. They need to really interact together, and to do that, they need to base their interaction on a very accurate information and data. Well, that said, unfortunately, those data are typically stored in different and siloed systems. It could be PLM, it could be the ERP, it could be BI system, it could be your CRM, it could be your SRM. I mean, you name it. You all have a kind of a variety of systems all across the world that make it very, very difficult to be on speaking terms between those systems. And how do they share information between each other, so those departments? Well, using emails and spreadsheets. So imagine someone in your organization that doesn't catch that there is a new revision to a part number on a drawing. That revision is written probably in a specific cell somewhere in an Excel that is attached into an email. And I'm sure that happens to some of you already quite a few times. So think of all the last minute RFQ changes, update, revise PPAP, everything that you have to manage in kind of emergency mode. That creates a lot of tension on your supply chain, creates sometimes a lot of tension for your customers as well. And all those are very, very big hidden costs. So, and I'm not here to make your day a bad day, but unfortunately, what I just described is probably the easy part because it's the part that you control because it's inside your organization. But with the end tiers or the extended supply chain, you need to make sure that this communication is effective not only inside your organization, but also outside your organization across your extended supply chain. And that's where these slides becomes more a spaghetti slide than anything else. It's a kind of a mess because now you have to multiply that communication everywhere. That's where the challenge becomes really big. And it's not only about transferring data to others, it's really about collecting and transferring data in real time, data that are accurate so that you can be manipulated, bring efficiency, and bring seamless deployments with it using artificial intelligence. That's how you're going to bring some resilience to your supply chain. So this revolution that Prashant was explaining before doesn't stop, as you understood, with electric vehicles, with the product. It's really about the entire change and your data processing. So let me use a kind of a high level business data flow. to bring more color to my example, that's a simplified data flow of a new program introduction in the automotive industry, right? Everything starts on the left of this slide with the two green boxes, the engineering one, which is where parts or bin of material gets designed, typically Siemens or a Dassault system PLM, and you're going to mix those information with the other green box, which is the program management one. That's where you collect information from your customers. Where do you need to deliver? What are the different scenarios? What are the different quantities? What are the volumes? And so on. You mix all of that to be able to build what we call the program execution, which means that I take my entire bill of material, I have all my components, I have to find out if all those components are new or do I have some carryover? Am I going to build some of those or am I going to buy all of them or partially of them? And then based on the different scenarios and locations that I need to deliver, where am I going to manufacture from? So where do I need to receive the components that I'm going to subcontract to all of my supply chain and for which quantities? That's what I'm doing in this box, program execution. Once I have that, then I will need to share it with my extended supply chain. And my extended supply chain means supply management. And here again, I need to have a very good understanding of who my supplier are. What are the ones that have the right status to be able to be eligible to receive an RFQ on a specific commodity in a specific region? Do they have the right compliances? Do I collect all the certificates that I need to collect? I mean, all those kind of information are key so that I could basically take all those components that I should buy and decide with whom I'm going to share that, with whom I'm going to request a quote, or just information on how to be able to manufacture those components. That's my purchasing phases. You may have multiple rounds of negotiations, whatever. At the end of that phase of purchasing, you collect all your quotes, you're able to compare that, you run your negotiation, and you're going to nominate your suppliers. You have a pretty extensive nomination flow typically in the manufacturing industry involving quality, finance, supply development, supply management, purchasing, and so on. And once that's done, well, then you have to go through your part quality approval. You can't buy a part without having it approved, especially in the aerospace and automotive industry. You've got pretty extensive processes, again, that would need to be fully digitalized so that you could really track it, make it visible. Am I on time? Did my suppliers, did his FMEA process? Where is he in my global PPAP process? Did he respond to all my first article inspections? Did he provide me with the right information? What are those information? Can I capture those? Can I highlight if there is anyone that doesn't fit well with what I was expecting? That's everything that needs to be done automatically so that then once the part is approved, you can then move to the supply chain. And again, we're going to play with digital information as well here on the supply chain. I'm going to reuse my forecast. I need to start describing what are going to be the packaging that I would use for those parts between that ship from and that ship to address. I may have different packaging, may have different labels based on which factory I'm going to receive the parts. And I need to be able to define that so that I have no non-conformity when production will start. And that's key. The more I control that part of the process, the more reliable my production will be and the less non-conformity I will have to deal with in the future. Then, of course, then I have all the other management, supply chain, forecast, pre-booking space, being sure that my suppliers have the right capacity to manufacture, but also making sure that the carrier that I'm using have the right capacity to move those goods. All of that at the same time, again, using the same source of data. That's why digitalization is key. When I have my forecast on the number of parts, I can tell my suppliers, you're going to need that capacity to manufacture the parts, but I'm also able to say, to ship those forecasts, I will need so much volume, so much weight from my carrier agent. So I can play with both at the same time. And then, of course, when execution happens, when the supplier says that he's ready to ship the goods, well, how do I make it more efficient? How do I have labels printed automatically? How do I have packing lists transmitted automatically? How do I have all the shipment notice information transferred automatically to my carrier agent so that I know that the truck that needs to do the first mile is able to come and pick up the goods? All of that without having me to interfere with it. I should only work on it when I have exception. That's what digitalizing brings. It brings efficiency. And if there is anything again happening that doesn't happen the way it should, that's an exception. That's where my control tower needs to tell me that I need to step in and I need to take action before the disruption really hurts me and damage my margin, but my brand as well. Then, so how can we solve this? What could be the solution? Well, the solution is a kind of a suite, basically, platform on internet that allows to orchestrate all those processes and making sure that the data flow across your entire ecosystem. Why do I say platform on the internet? Because you've got a huge ecosystem. So let's start with that ecosystem. Who is it? Well, it could be, as you can see on the slide, it could be your suppliers that are involved in manufacturing the products, and there will be hundreds. It could be suppliers that are involved in delivering the product, whether they are freight forwarder, motor carrier, air carrier, ocean carrier, whatever. And by the way, on our platform, the average that we have that we see with our customers, the average number of stakeholder involved into the shipment only is 14. So quite a lot of companies. It's also, of course, all of your departments: procurement, quality, finance, supply development, engineering, planner, logistic, whatever. All those departments that have an action to take in that process. It's, of course, all the information system. It could be PLM, ERP, TMS. It could be also third party, Dun & Bradstreet or BVD, whatever. And of course, all your customers, all the departments that are facing customers, not only to collect data and forecast from them, but also to be able to bring them real-time visibility and therefore providing kind of added value to them and building trust because of the transparency that you're going to bring. So in a word, it's a very large and wide network, fragmented stakeholders. And so the solution here is to build a network that will sit on a global platform and that bring efficiency to those stakeholders. One key of the success of such a system is to be able to capture digitalized information. You're only going to capture that if you have adoption from your supply chain. That means that it's got to be easy for them to use, but that also means that it's got to bring them value, not only to you. Otherwise, you will spend your day forcing them to log the information that you expect on the platform, which is not going to bring you a big return on investment. The second main component of the solution, it's the, I would say, natively connected blockchain that you see here with those three big blocks, right? Let's start with the one on the left, which is supplier relationship management. That's everything that happens basically before the order. So as we saw, it's, if you look at the suppliers management, it's how do you make sure that you have a reservoir of suppliers? How do you make sure that you have enough suppliers by commodity? How do you make sure you track the information, the risk on those suppliers? How do you make sure you follow their performance and that these performance get factored into your decision-making analysis? How do you make sure that if you have a crisis happening on your suppliers, you have a way to control it and to capture information, such as COVID-19, for example, a few years ago? The second block is sourcing, of course, and that's it's mainly automation of processes, transparency, negotiation, contract management, and everything managed at the commodity level. You don't buy a plastic injected part as you buy transport or as you buy machining. It's not the same way. It's not the same information that you capture. You don't track the same information for your suppliers. You don't have the same way of managing their capacity. It's very different. That's what makes it a little bit complicated in manufacturing. You don't only track from the price and the delivery time. Part quality, not only before contract with part approval, but also after contract during the production life. So what are the non-conformity that you capture? What are possibly the deviation that would be entered by your suppliers? What are the corrective action that you may take? And how do you make all of that very visible? That's the program execution. You have to make it visible. Where are you with your program? Are you on time? Are you running late? Who hasn't delivered on time? How can you help? Because you always have to keep the same goal in mind. You have to deliver on time in full. You can't deliver 3 weeks late the first part to your OEM. That won't work. You're going to lose him otherwise. Second block, order management. Order management is basically managing purchase orders, forecasts, everything that has to do with packaging agreement, as we saw, delivery notes, labels, shipping notice, and all of that has to be very automated. The goal here is basically, if you work with big suppliers, you're probably going to use EDI to manage part of that information. But everybody has a kind of a long tail of suppliers that are not EDI connected. So how can you make sure that you could get the same level of information from those suppliers that are not EDI connected as if they were EDI connected? That's the point. And how can I reuse that digitalized information for the next block, which is transportation? So basically, when supplier says, I'm ready to ship, how can I set the information that is needed by my freight forwarder or by my carrier agents so that they know when they have to pick up the goods, where, what's the volume, what's the weight that they need to deliver to that part, to that next leg? How can I make sure that if I have a multi-leg shipment, for example, rail, road, rail, ocean, and road again, for example, if I miss the train, how am I going to react? Is it a big issue for my boat, or can I catch the next one, or is the next train going to still arrive on time? I need to know all of that information. And again, that's only digitalized information, and that's only the system that is going to help me having visibility on where I need to interact. Um, so if I take an example to be a little bit more clear of that digitalization, if we take a part, for example, during the sourcing phase, I'm going to capture information during my nomination flow from the various departments, for example, from quality, about what kind of part approval process would be needed. Is it going to be an extensive PPAP? Is it going to be an easy one, an interim one? That information, if I capture it, digitalize during my nomination, then it's very easy for me to automate the rest of the process. If I don't capture it, if I don't have it, there is no way I can automate my process. During the order management, when I capture the information on packaging, for example, when I know that I could put 100 parts per box, I could put 10 box per pallet, it's going to weight that much, it's going to be that volume. Well, only when I have that information, only then I'm able, based on the forecast, to tell my carrier agent, here is the space that I will need in 6 months. Because in 6 months from now, I've got my volume, but I have to be able to translate the volume of parts into a real volume in cubic meters and in weight as well. And during the transportation management, it's only if I am able to capture very granular data, such as port congestion, for example, that I'm able to impact the real ETA of my goods and make sure that I have a very accurate ETA at the end. If I don't have that information again, I miss the data, I've got gray area in my supply chain, and I'm not going to build a resilient supply chain because I don't know enough. And the only way to know enough using the volume, as you understood, using the size of the network, is to have a fully digitalized solution. Prashant?
Yep, great insights, Francois. So we'll get into the case study part in a bit, but I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about Bloom Global. For those who are not familiar with Bloom Global, we are the only cloud-first digital supply chain orchestration platform, and we provide end-to-end visibility and execution capabilities to all the participants in the ecosystem. So we are in business since 1994, about 28 years now. And if you look at the screen, we have been identified as one of the you know uh, participants in the RTTVP Magic Quadrant from Gartner, the research analyst firm, in 2022. And we've been offering our solution as a SaaS offering over the cloud, Google Cloud Platform. Google Cloud is our partner there in the technology front. And I'll talk about the network in a bit in the next slide. If these are network, by the way, if you look at these numbers, they're huge. For a period of several years, we've been spending that we are spending time to build our network. If you look at the number of carriers that we are connected to, they're in hundreds, especially thousands. When you could talk about motor carriers, and we are connected to the top 50 ocean carriers, and um, we have offices across 8 locations across the globe. We have a presence in 170 plus countries. We've been servicing our customers in 24 different languages. And if you could take a look at the number of shipments that we've been tracking in the past 1 year, it's huge. What I'm trying to say is, as Francois explained, the solution that requires for a typical automotive supply chain to be run efficiently, it's something that you are getting to see here. Network, and we've been doing this for many number of years. Um, and the solution that we offer spans right from sourcing from suppliers to planning, execution, and also tracking real time. And the best part is it's not just tracking real time, the tracking shipments per se, but we also provide tracking to the SKU level or order level too. So we are one company that we're able to fill in the gap that happens in tracking shipments that are in transit, but also fill the gap by providing the visibility that happens during the manufacturing phase and the sourcing, especially the gray part that resides with the suppliers. And as you can see, we have been helping our customers to create agile business networks so that our customers can get all their stakeholders onto a common collaborative platform in real time, which I believe is a large contributor to kind of repair your supply chain when something goes wrong. In other words, to become more resilient. And in addition to getting the data real time and getting the customers, stakeholders, or business partners to participate in real time, we are all also able to get data insights. We have data, but uh, I, our platform is kind of evolving to become more intelligent. We derive a lot of insightful information from the data that we have been collecting over many years, and helping our customers to make better decisions. Uh, and the real-time data, it's something that we can put in some business rules and let the participant knows if something goes wrong real time. And there are instances where we're able to alert the participant even before something untoward that may happen in a supply chain setup. Right. And this is in brief about Bloom Global. Francois, would you like to take a couple of minutes to go through the case study of one of our customers?
Sure. Sure. So the case study is Dana. So Dana is manufacturing transmissions for the automotive and for some of the off-road vehicles as well. So they have a mix of need that is very high volume and low volume as well. And what Dana did is they grew massively through acquisition. So they had a little bit over 100 different systems, information systems around the world that were not talking to each other, as we said. And so one of the main goals that they had was to be able to centralize and homogenize the data. Because when you're using different systems, it might be the same parts in different plants, but it's of course not the same part number. You might buy it from the same suppliers, but unfortunately, it's not the same vendor code as well in the ERP system. So how do you centralize? How do you homogenize all that information? And then how do you keep, again, as we said, um, in permanent contact with those suppliers to be able to capture right information from them? So Dana, for example, on the supply management, uh, they capture and they track on a monthly basis over 450 data points on each of their suppliers. And all of those data are reused across their entire process to make sure that when they do a decision analysis, they base that decision analysis on real and accurate facts. They also want to make sure that, and they did that with the COVID-19, for example, they've put a plan in place in less than 24 hours. They knew who were the suppliers mostly impacted, who were the strategic suppliers without whom they would not be able to deliver the product when COVID would be over. And so who were going to be the strategic suppliers that they were going to support and keep on sending orders to keep them alive. All of that in less than 24 hours. But you can, again, only do that when you've got the right level of granularity of your data digitalized so that you can manipulate those.
Right. Interesting. So We have another 5 minutes to go. We have got a couple of questions when participant registered for the webinar, and I encourage the participant to post questions by going to our website, and we'll get back to you, each one of you, via email. And that's it about the webinar for today. Thanks a lot for joining on a Tuesday afternoon, taking time off your schedule. And feel free to post questions by visiting our website. And that's it for today. Thanks, Francois, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.